Today, we're going to dive into what is essentially China's first great ideological revolution. It's an amazing story about how a single, really powerful idea about who gets to be in charge didn't just bring down a dynasty, it basically wrote the rulebook for a civilization for thousands of years to come.
So think about that for a second. What kind of idea is so powerful it can shape a culture for 3,000 years? It's not a weapon, it's not some new technology. It's a brand new answer to the oldest question there is. Who deserves to be in charge? All right, so let's set the scene. It's around 1046 BCE. The Zhao people have just conquered the ruling Shang dynasty. Now, for the Zhao, this was a massive problem. They were the outsiders, the invaders. How do you justify that to everyone? You can't just say, well, our army was bigger. You need a better story. So on one side, you have the Shang, whose power was all about force and who your great-great-grandfather was. And on the other, you have the Zhao, who showed up with something totally new, a complete revolution in how you think about justice, power, and really the universe itself. To really get how radical the Zhu's idea was, we have to step into the world they just conquered, the world of the Shang. You see, their entire system, everything they believed about power, was built on a connection to a very specific and, frankly, very scary divine force. The big boss in the Shang universe was a high god named Di. Now, you gotta understand, Di was not a friendly god. Di was this remote, cosmic force that controlled everything. The harvest, the weather, whether you won or lost a battle. And here's the kicker. Di was totally amoral. It didn't care if you were a good person or a bad person. The only way you could even try to influence Di was by talking to your dead royal ancestors. So power wasn't earned, it was literally in your blood. And this wasn't just some abstract idea. The Shang made it real. They created these incredible, intricate bronze vessels. These weren't just art, they were pieces of technology. They were the tools for these huge, complicated ceremonies to talk to their ancestors. The only hotline they had to the big guy, Di. Being a Shang king wasn't about making good policy. It was about putting on a good show, constantly trying to keep these powerful, unpredictable forces happy. So you can probably see the fatal flaw in the Shang's whole worldview, right? The king's right to rule was absolute, based only on his bloodline. He's the one and only bridge to the gods. But what happens when that bridge seems to be out? When there are floods or famines, and the totally amoral god Di seems angry for no reason at all, who do you blame? The system had no answer for that. And this right here is where the Zhao come in. They didn't just bring a better army. They brought a better idea. You could almost call it a brand new operating system for the entire universe and the ruler's place in it. What the Zhao did was brilliant. They replaced the personal moody god Di with a totally new concept, Tian, which we translate as heaven. Now, Tian wasn't a person you had to bribe or please. Tian was an impartial, universal moral force. Here's a way to think about it. Di was like a crazy, unpredictable CEO you had to constantly suck up to. Tian, on the other hand, was like the universal corporate bylaws that everyone had to follow, even the CEO. Suddenly, power wasn't about your ancestors, it was about your virtue. And here is the most revolutionary part of all. How could you know the will of this new moral heaven? Well, the Zhao said, you look at the people. This idea that heaven's judgment is reflected in the happiness and well-being of the ordinary person was absolutely staggering. It took the common people from being just subjects and turned them into a kind of cosmic report card for the ruler's performance. And all of this comes together in the Zhao's single greatest innovation, the big idea that would define Chinese history, the Tianming, or, as we know it, the Mandate of Heaven. This was their killer app, their solution to the problem of a ruler whose power was absolute but also totally random. Okay, so how does it work? It's actually a pretty simple four-step cycle. First, heaven grants the mandate, the right to rule, to a just and good leader. But, and this is the absolute key, that mandate is not a lifetime guarantee. If that ruler or his kids or his grandkids become corrupt and cruel and the people suffer, heaven takes the mandate back. You'd see signs of this, like earthquakes or floods. And finally, heaven finds a new, worthy leader to give the mandate to, which means rebellion isn't a crime anymore, it's a moral duty. This simple idea created the fundamental rhythm of Chinese history, what we call the dynastic cycle. A new dynasty comes to power, full of energy and virtue. Over the centuries, it gets lazy, corrupt, disasters strike, it loses the mandate of heaven, it gets overthrown, and a new dynasty starts the whole cycle over again. This wasn't just a one-off excuse for the Zhao. It became the pattern for everything that followed. So having a cool cosmic idea is one thing. But how do you actually, run a country based on it? Well, the Zhao translated this philosophy into a whole new blueprint for society, one that was designed to reflect this new moral order. They set up what we call a kinship feudal system. At the very center was the Zhou king, who now had this amazing new title, the Son of Heaven. And from that center, he granted huge chunks of land to his relatives and his most loyal allies. It created this massive web of personal loyalty and obligation that stretched all across the kingdom. Now, these lords, they didn't just get a free piece of land. They got a huge responsibility. They owed the king taxes, and more importantly, soldiers in times of war. But the real glue holding the whole thing together wasn't just force. It was a shared moral code, a shared set of rituals. It was a system built on earned trust and mutual duty, all flowing from that central idea that heaven demands a just world. So why on earth are we talking about an idea from over 3,000 years ago? Well, because its influence is it's almost impossible to overstate. This wasn't just a temporary political slogan. It became the political DNA of an entire civilization. For more than 3,000 years, from the Zhou dynasty all the way up to the fall of the very last dynasty, the Qing, in 1912, the mandate of heaven was the ultimate source of legitimacy in China. Every single emperor who took the throne had to claim it, and every single rebellion was started to prove that the old emperor had lost it. So let's just boil it all down. Why does this ancient idea still matter so much? It really comes down to 4 huge legacies. First, it fused morality directly to the right to rule. Second, it created the dynastic cycle, the very engine of Chinese history. Third, it laid the foundation for all the great philosophers, like Confucius, who would spend centuries debating what virtue even meant. And finally, it gave a powerful cosmic voice to the people, making their well-being the ultimate test of a good ruler. And that leaves us with one final, timeless question that's been echoing through history for 3,000 years. If the right to rule is given by a moral heaven based entirely on a ruler's virtue, who on earth gets to be the judge of when that virtue is gone?